We'll look at the principles behind the web, and more specifically REST rules that allow for robust and reliable services. The basic element is the resource, which can be defined as a finite block of data. Resources can themselves contain references to other resources, which in turn reference other resources, etc. This forms a mesh between resources compared to a spider web. The resource can be, for example, an image, in which case it won't reference anything else. To reference another resource, its content must be structured and defined in a format where one can easily understand that part of the content is a reference to another resource. HTML is one of these languages that allows web pages to reference each other through links. To reference a resource, it must be identifiable. Since this is a global system, each identifier must be unique in the world. But how to ensure an identifier will be unique, and that someone else on Earth won't use the same one? Having a single place giving unique identifiers to all resources wouldn't scale. So, we'll take a hierarchical approach. We'll build a unique identifier by adding text to something we know is unique. For example, I can call a resource images. It's unlikely I'm alone in the world to have done this. However, if I add my phone number or social security number, which I know is unique, then I'll have a unique identifier. Like with phone numbers, I can also add a domain name that belongs to me and is unique since I paid for it. This gives us an idea of the method to build unique identifiers. First, we put a scheme. The scheme will indicate which unique elements I use and avoid confusion between. For example, a social security number and a phone number. But the scheme will also indicate how the rest will be structured. Then comes the authority, if the scheme requires it, which is the unique part. After the authority, meaning the unique part I own, I can add a path that will identify the resource. These form a URI, Universal Resources Identifier, that defines a universal addressing scheme allowing easy allocation of identifiers to resources while guaranteeing their uniqueness. For example, Spotify defined its own scheme and then doesn't need authority, but structures the path to reference a playlist. All books have an ISBN number that allows identification. It can also be integrated into a URI. These two types of identifiers allow referencing a unique object, but just by reading it, one cannot access the resource. This URI subfamily is called URN, Universal Resource Name. On the other hand, by reading the URI, one can locate the resource. We have a URL, Universal Resource Locator. The initial goal is to make a unique identifier. The HTTPS scheme gives how the rest will be built, and only secondarily will be seen as the protocol to use to access the resource. The authority is unique and secondarily will serve to locate the server. And finally, the path will indicate how to access the resource on the server. So the resources of our worldwide spider web are present on servers, and each resource has a unique identifier. Initially, the client knows a resource's URI. If it's a URL, it can contact the server. The server returns the resource. The client analyzes it and discovers the URIs it contains. It can then query the other servers to locally rebuild part of the web needed for the processing the client wants to perform. The interactions between clients and servers are very simple. The client will manage interactions with resources on a server. It can, for example, retrieve a resource via a GET method. It can also write data to an existing resource via a PUT method. You'll see that the number of interactions is very limited. HTTP or HTTPS is a way to implement these methods. To summarize what REST is, we have resources that are blocks of information. These resources are identified by unique identifiers, URI, Resources can contain URI. Resources can contain URI. Servers have the resources, and clients interact with servers via a very limited set of interactions. Servers only respond to client requests. If a state is needed for a more complex service, it is maintained on the client and not on the server.